Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking a massive, hidden butterfly effect. We're looking at what would happen if one of the absolute biggest mistakes in sitcom history simply never happened. I mean, we all know the moment, right? The altar, the slip of the tongue, the utter disaster that followed. But what if all of that played out completely differently? Today we're mapping out the precise ripple effect of a lasting marriage between Ross and Emily.
So let's dive right into this alternate reality where Ross doesn't say Rachel's name and Emily doesn't walk away. We're going to explore the shocking, totally undeniable ripple effect this single change would have on literally every major relationship in the show. Because when you actually trace the narrative logic, keeping these two together doesn't just change their lives, it rewrites the entire emotional DNA of the whole friend group.
Section 1. The alternate London wedding.
To really understand how everything shifts, we first got to go back to Season 4 in London, and we need to frame Emily not just as a punchline or some temporary roadblock, but as a genuinely stabilizing force in Ross's life. If you map out their timeline, he meets her when he's trying to rebuild his life after multiple failed relationships. They have this lightning-speed romance, and then boom, suddenly they're at the altar in London. Despite the speed, this wasn't written as a joke. This was set up as a real, tangible future.
You see, Emily equaled stability, adventure, and, perhaps most importantly, absolutely zero emotional baggage. She represented something totally outside the group's chaotic history. And that is exactly why Ross fell for her so incredibly fast. She wasn't carrying nearly a decade of complicated, messy ties to his immediate circle. She was just a complete breath of fresh air.
Let's map out the immediate aftermath here. If the wedding goes smoothly, Ross inevitably moves to the UK. Honestly, that's a massive compromise he was actually already willing to make to keep the relationship alive. But the moment he does, the core group's dynamic shifts permanently. He becomes significantly less present in New York, and that physical absence, that's what kicks off our entire butterfly effect.
Section 2. Rachel's path to independence.
Let's see how this physical distance transforms Rachel, because her entire trajectory completely changes the moment Ross is fully committed and living an ocean away. Now, in the original timeline, she's emotionally stuck, right? Constantly pulled back by all the Ross drama. But in this alternate reality, she is completely independent and she accelerates her fashion career way earlier. Without that agonizing will they won't they tension anchoring her to the past, Rachel is literally forced into independence. She becomes incredibly successful and confident much faster, all because she isn't waiting around for Ross to figure things out.
0. That represents the exact amount of emotional indecision Rachel has left in this new timeline. It's actually a great reminder that sometimes having a door definitively closed in our faces is exactly what we need to finally sprint forward. Ironically, this means Ross staying with Emily could have actually made Rachel far happier and more self-assured in the long run. By closing the door on their romance completely, she's finally free to really take charge of her own life.
Section 3. Changing the friend group dynamics. So what happens to the rest of the gang when Ross moves away and the emotional atmosphere of the entire show shifts? The collateral damage is absolutely massive. Monica loses her nearby brother and support system. Chandler loses a crucial piece of the emotional glue holding the guys together. Joey actually matures much faster emotionally without the surrounding chaos of Ross and Rachel. And Phoebe? Well, you know Phoebe. She probably predicts the marriage's doom anyway through some mystical aura.
But here is the real kicker. Monica and Chandler never hook up in London. Just think about it for a second. In the original timeline, it's the emotional vulnerability and the sheer chaos surrounding Ross's wedding that creates the spark for Monica and Chandler's impulsive night. A stable, totally drama-free wedding means that atmosphere just never exists, which ends up costing the show, and us as the audience, one of its greatest love stories. Wild, right?
Section 4. Ross's hidden emotional turmoil.
Now we gotta shift gears a bit and look inward at Ross. Because, let's be real, signing a piece of paper doesn't magically erase deeply rooted trust issues and emotional baggage. The original Ross is the hopeless romantic, constantly chasing Rachel. But the alternate Ross, he is desperately clinging to this marriage just to avoid yet another failure. Ross deeply feared ending up alone, so he'd likely grip on to this stable life with Emily super tightly, trying to convince himself he made the right choice. And that actually makes him far more emotionally conflicted beneath the surface. This quote from our source material really hits the nail on the head. If the marriage survives, those unresolved feelings don't magically disappear. They just go underground. Even before London, Ross and Rachel had an incredibly complicated history. Emily's later insecurities, they weren't completely irrational at all. They were based on a very real, unfinished emotional tie.
Tying the knot with Emily simply buries that history. It definitely doesn't resolve it.
Which brings us to a super fascinating psychological question. What happens when Ross sees Rachel thriving completely without him? Remember, Rachel's back in New York, totally crushing it in the fashion industry, fully independent. And Ross and Rachel always had this strange habit of wanting each other the most when the other person was unavailable. Seeing her move on completely would, without a doubt, force Ross to realize he never fully let her go.
Section 5. Why it was doomed anyway.
This brings us to the inevitable collapse, and why this calm, alternate timeline is ultimately just a ticking time bomb waiting to go off. Let's look at the actual foundation of this marriage. Ross's proposal was way too quick after his previous heartbreak. The reality of Rachel's flight to London was that she fully intended to confess her lingering feelings, and their historical ties never truly finished. This relationship with Emily was built entirely during a period of massive emotional confusion for literally everyone involved.
So here is the absolute most important takeaway of our entire analysis. The wedding mistake didn't create the underlying problem. It exposed it. Keeping Ross and Emily together doesn't fix the emotional cracks in their foundation. It merely delays the inevitable explosion of Ross and Rachel's emotional gravity. You just can't outrun nearly a decade of nostalgia and unfinished business. It's going to catch up to you.
And that perfectly captures the ultimate theme of the series. As the source states, love stories aren't always about choosing the right person. It was never about perfect love. It was about messy people, bad timing, and just trying to figure life out together. Emily might have been the right person on paper, stable, fresh, adventurous, but human emotions rarely stick to the script.
Because sometimes they're about the person you can never completely leave behind. And for Ross, that person was always, undeniably, Rachel. A calmer, alternate timeline where he stays in London with Emily would basically mean losing the beautiful, unforgettable unpredictability that made this series so incredibly real to millions of people.
Thank you for joining this explainer. We've mapped out the logic, the emotional shifts, and the massive butterfly effect of this fascinating alternate reality. But now, I'm going to leave you with this final thought to debate. Do you think Ross and Emily could have actually lasted if he just said the right name? Or was their relationship totally doomed by history from the very beginning? Take a moment to think about that and keep exploring the hidden depths of the stories we think we know so well. Catch you next time.